The world is full of misunderstandings. At school, we learn to communicate through writing and talking. But there are about 5,000 languages out there, each language with its own way of sharing ideas. Different ways of sharing ideas often gives different ideas, and that's great. But it also makes understanding a huge challenge. So how can we reach a higher level of understanding? I think one answer to this question is to move back to start, back to the basics of human nature. After all, we are moving beings, communicating through body movements. In my dance company called Frikar, we have dancers from all over the world with different backgrounds, languages, and way of thinking. Dancing and communicating on stage is easy, but talking backstage is often more difficult. I remember one performance. I hurt my knee, and it was crucial to ice it down to be able to do the next performance. So I stood there with my ice bag when a colleague from a warmer country came up to me, took the bag, and said, "I'll do that for you." He didn't understand it was an ice bag, so he opened it up as it was a bag of chips. Of course, I got frustrated, and when I get moved like that, I really need to move, like kicking the air or clenching my fists or some other way to get my feeling out. The other colleague of mine, they were rolling on their backs, sharing a good laugh of the situation. This helped me to realize that we are all movers, unable not to express ourselves. We communicate instinctively and always. I believe in the power of moving. As a choreographer, a movement maker, I see it over and over again when I move or when I make my dancers move in new and different ways. It gives us a new set of ideas. New movement gives new ideas. Imagine the opposite. Everybody moving in the same way. Everybody dancing as on MTV. Nobody doing sports or any other dance style. Wouldn't we have less to talk about? Less ideas to share? That's why diversity is so important. That's why we should design the communication of tomorrow, building on the diversity of our movement traditions. And this led me to ask myself the question, how can we create a global language between people who don't share one common language? The answer is simple, through body movement. In 2010, after the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded the Chinese intellectual Liu Xiaobo, Norway and China became bitter enemies. Most artistic and commercial collaborations were denied visa, and the politicians were going to spend years of talking without truly understand each other. But what if Norway and China communicated through body movement? In order to prove that movements beat words, I needed to come up with a close to impossible task. So what about creating an innovative stage performance, one that the world has never seen before? And what if I did it with people I don't share one common language with, who have never performed on stage before and have no interest in Western thinking or moving? And what if we were to succeed without the use of an interpreter? Wouldn't that be something for the future? But I wanted the help of traditions, of knowledge surviving generations and centuries. After all, I had my Hallgrim dance, and I thought Chinese Kung Fu would be a proper complement to that. So I went to the Wudang Mountains, 10 hours flight from Oslo, 21 hours by train from Beijing, and 2 hours walk uphill. I found this Taoist master, and I tried by gestures and movements to explain him the idea of combining dance and Kung Fu. He lifted his eyebrows, and I understood he was confused. So, presenting myself was crucial. So I danced my dance for him. He laughed and rejected my idea. So I continued to try to persuade him. He brought me into his office, switched on his computer, and typed something into the Chinese answer to Google Translate. Dance, martial art, no function. Later I understood it was only meant to be a teasing challenge. Dance is martial arts with no function. So I studied by the master for 2 months, slowly earning his respect. He made me repeat a few movements over and over and over again, until I quit thinking. I started, through movements, to understand the very core of his philosophy. Don't think, just move. Time had come to ask him another time, so I gestured. I danced. I performed Kung Fu. I ran a Google Earth presentation going from China through 30 Norwegian cities. And I also showed him pictures of the stages. He got curious, but gave no promises. Some weeks later, I stood there with 4 of his best monks, ready to start working. But where to start? In a Chinese Kung Fu, each move has its story or function against imaginary opponents. As Westerners used to watch choreographed fights in Kung Fu movies, we have a hard time to understand the richness of the traditional Kung Fu. But what if I, for example, completely decided to westernize the very core of the tradition? From a choreographer's perspective, I wanted to let their collectivism merge with my individualistic way of thinking. So I selected the 700 years old sword sequence, which is always performed alone or synchronized together with the others. I teared it apart in fragments and put it together again, making 3 voices fighting each other. So let's have a look at the process. This process evoked conflict, which gave loads of interesting body language. Slowly, I started to see the different characters. So time had come to bring over my frikar dancers from Norway. Finally, we could start working on our stage performance with the 8 chosen ones. I had this vision of a performance where each one could tell the audience about how they experienced the meetings and collaboration, all expressed through moving arts. But in the beginning, it was hard for them to communicate well. They showed off with their traditions without the courage of moving their traditions in explorative ways. So we need an icebreaker. I decided to go for a trip all together. We walked down some rice fields and found a peaceful place. We had brought wooden sticks and ropes and leather cups, and I showed only the monks how to build tents out of this equipment. Then I explained the monks to explain the dancers how to build the tents and how to move inside them. In order to force the monks to challenge their body language, They were not allowed to touch the material while explaining. And as you know, they didn't share one common language. Every gesture, face expression, and body movement was recorded by my video cameras. So why don't we join the group on this important icebreaker day?
Niemen. Bo. Niemen. Odne.
Okay.
Then, sure. Okay. And you. Okay, I'll put closer. Knee.
Jeg tror ikke jeg tør.
How? Put da. Da.
You know, when we talk, we can build a story and saving the point to the end. This day, we found out that when communicating only through body movements, we really need to start with the main idea, adding details to explain it better. I chose the most important moments between the Chinese Chen and the Norwegian Vetle. The moments show who they are and what they feel about their collaboration. So I gave them a computer with the selected videos and asked them to relearn this material. Actually, I asked Vetle to explain the task to Chen. So I'd like to share you some moments from the work with this dialogue. But first, a little clip with Vetle, reminding you about how global this dialogue through movements may be.
Jeg hadde større munn enn han, så da ga han seg. I, how. I, how.
Hva er det? Bung. One. Ni, kan. Ba.
What they didn't know was that the computer they used had a web camera recording their relearning process. And this generated even more interesting material for our stage performance. I felt we were approaching our goal. Each one of us got more into the idea, getting more and more motivated. And one day, the youngest one, being 10 years old, he got bored of our work as an ensemble. So he picked a tent and started to ride on its rope, yelling, "Beijing! Norway!" And I got touched by the way this little kid expressed his dreams and imaginations through body movements. So I really had to help him communicate his little story in our performance to the global audience. And here are some moments from our creative collaboration. And how?
Yeah, go to Beijing!
We took a lot of risks in this project. For a long while, I didn't know if the little monk would ever have the opportunity to tell his little story to anybody else than his Kung Fu brothers. Actually, until the very end of our stay in China, the monks had still not got their visas for going to Europe touring with us. But our most risky project ever turned out to be our biggest success, selling out every seat throughout the tour. And we made a dance movie together with the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation and its symphony orchestra. And actually 2 days ago, we got this silver prize for this dance movie in the international television competition Prix Italia. And global media, they made a documentary film distributing it in Norway, Sweden, Germany, and United States. But what did the Taoist master say? I had a lot of respect for him, but I didn't expect him to understand the very core of my idea, beyond the fusion of genders. The very morning I left his temple after 4 months of living there, he woke me up with a gift, a fresh calligraphy saying, "Dance and martial art understand each other." So I invited him over to Norway to see what you are going to see now. Some moments from our stage performance. Ni. God. Select. In the end, it all comes down to what we are made to do. As small babies, we communicate through body movements. Then we go to school for 13 years or so, learning to communicate through reading, writing, and talking. Our movements being reduced to touchscreen gestures. Now it's time to move back to start, back to the basics of human communication. We need to relearn to communicate through moving our bodies, moving through barriers of culture and languages, dancing our way into the future, all together.